to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We're going to try a short election of Senator.
All right, ladies, thank you so much. That's our Council Rock Faculty Woodwind Quintet. Thank you so much for gracing us with your presence this evening and doing all that you do every day, especially working with our students. Very much appreciated. Thank you. Thank you.
Roll call, please.
Dr. Foster,
Here.
Mr. Grupp,
Present.
Mrs. McKessie,
Here.
Mr. Tate,
Here.
Mrs. Thomas,
Here.
Dr. Thorwart,
Here.
Mr. Block,
Here.
Mr. Bartlett,
Here.
Mrs. Brooks.
Great. Roll call, please. Or, I'm sorry, roll call. Superintendent's report.
I think I can handle the report. I know, mine's right here as well. We'll try not to throw these around too much this evening. Good evening, everyone. I am going to update our public on a number of dates and upcoming events here this evening, and we're going to begin with the end in mind. And we'll do so optimistically. As you might know, we have just a touch of snow in the forecast for this evening and tomorrow morning. It is just a touch, so we're pretty optimistic heading into tomorrow morning. So with that in mind, tentatively as of right now, our last day of school is scheduled for Friday, June 10th. Which would also make our 2 high school graduations also scheduled for Friday, June 10th. And that is provided, of course, that we have no more snow days or other kinds of cancellations that might come before us. To our kindergarten parents, I want to announce a schedule change for you. And this will be coming out through other means as well. Next Friday, March 11th, is an early dismissal day in Council Rock, and it has been planned as a PM kindergarten day. And because we have had 4 two-hour delays this year, we are changing next Friday, March 10th, from a PM kindergarten day to an AM kindergarten day. So the reason for this change is to help balance the time that our AM students and our PM students at the kindergarten level spend in school. So again, next Friday, March 11th, has been scheduled as a PM kindergarten change day. It will now be an AM kindergarten day. We are very excited in the school district that our winter plays are before us. This weekend, both of our high schools are running their winter plays. The Golden Wings Theater Company at South is performing The Little Mermaid this weekend. In fact, they are debuting as we are meeting at this very moment. I believe they kicked off at 7 p.m. this evening. So I'm looking forward to my performance this weekend. They will be having a show tomorrow evening, Saturday afternoon, and again on Saturday evening. And then Sauk and Buskin, the group over at North, they will be performing this weekend Oscar Wilde's The Importance of Being Earnest. So they will be debuting tomorrow evening and also running shows on Saturday evening and then again on Sunday evening. So very exciting times in front of us. And then on Saturday, March 12th, we have Acapella at the Rock, an event that I'm also very much looking forward to going to. And it seems that I am not alone, because for quite a few days now, that event has been entirely sold out. So if you've been looking forward to going and have been procrastinating, then shame on you. Your opportunity has passed, at least until next year's event. So that again is on Saturday, March 12th at North, Acapella at the Rock, and a number of schools will be there for that particular musical event. I will also note that we have a number of elementary and middle school performances going on right now as well. If you have a chance, get out there and check it out. We got some really talented kiddos in this school district at the elementary and middle school levels. I know that Mr. McClay and I had a chance on Monday morning, a really exciting opportunity to head over to Rolling Hills Elementary. They are have been putting on this week Aladdin, and they took it on themselves this year as a faculty, and it was just very, very impressive. And then I found out that they actually have an entirely separate cast as well, who they had ready to perform that play. So just very impressive that they were able to get 2 entire groups ready for that. So if you have a chance to check out some of our students in action in the arts, please do so. One event that we held recently on February 20th was called Spin Out at the Rock. I would like to congratulate Mr. John Burns, who's our band conductor over at South, and all those who helped Mr. Burns, and I know that there were many of you, for running such an outstanding event. This was for the color guards, all the guards in the area from New Jersey, Delaware, and from southeastern Pennsylvania. We had teams from North and South participating, as well as a combined team from Holland and Richboro Middle Schools. So Mr. Thorwart, I know you had a chance to be there, and Mr. President, Andy Block, and I had the pleasure of handing out awards at the end of the evening, and it was just really, truly an outstanding event. And they had it last year, and they had the misfortune of having a big snowstorm on that particular Saturday. So only about half of the schools were able to show up. And this year, by the end of the evening, that gymnasium was absolutely packed. So again, just a wonderful way to celebrate all the talent that we have in the school district. And another event this evening that I want to note that is still about a month and a half away. It's coming up on Sunday, April 24th. That's our annual March of Dimes run that we have in the district. So Mr. Block had referenced these purple footballs that we have up here. So I see a crew in the back of the room here. So I'm going to invite you forward. And I believe we have a special presentation here this evening. So our faculty advisor for March of Dimes is Dr. Helen Gross. So Dr. Gross is making her way to the podium. And from March of Dimes itself, we have at the podium right now, Mr. Bob Smoose. Mr. Smoose, it's wonderful to see you.
Great to see you also. Thank you for taking some time this evening to let us talk a little bit about the March of Dimes and the March for Babies coming up at the end of April. Helen Gross, who has been for many years my partner in crime here with, she's my liaison to Council Rock, which I really appreciate all that time. Then behind me is our Newtown Middle School contingent. They were the #1 school again this year in Southeast Pennsylvania. We have a plaque for them. Before we get to that, I did want to mention, and Dr. Fraser, I talked to you a little bit about this earlier, about how wonderful Council Rock has done over the years. And this year, Council Rock, or actually in 2015, the Council Rock team was the #1 school team in the state of Pennsylvania, which was terrific, and we're very proud of that. That's like a trend that has been going on for a long time, which is fantastic. The other thing I found was very interesting. I went back to trying to see where we were at nationally, and it was very good news. Council Rock is the 14th largest school team in the country. It's amazing. I mean, it's just an amazing record that Council Rock has. It's been something that's been going on here for at least back into the mid-'80s. I have records going back to the mid-'90s that I can track, and since I think '95, Council Rock has raised over $550,000 in support of the March of Dimes. So thank you all very, very much for that. I did want to mention, hopefully you saw the little football that I put around that way, a little stress football there. As the evening goes on, the stress starts.
You didn't have bigger ones?
No, that's it. I can get you a few though. And I also left a pen, and I will tell you, don't push down on the pen. It's a twist pen, so just so you don't think it's broken, just as FYI. And I also left some information for you, a little bit about the March of Dimes, some of the information about what the March of Dimes has been doing, some of the money that we've been spending in Pennsylvania in the way of research and things like that. And then also the last page is every year we put out a report card in November, which is National Prematurity Awareness Month. And sadly, the United States, has a grade C when it comes to premature birth, as does the state of Pennsylvania. So it has been getting better. We have a long way to go, which is why we continue to need your help. That being said, I would like to present a plaque to Council Rock, the Newtown Middle School folks, and thank them for, again, this is I think 2 years in a row now that they have been the #1 team in Southeast Pennsylvania, which is a terrific accomplishment. The biggest competition actually comes from their own schools pretty much every year. So I think this year, Holland was #2, I think, this year. So congratulations and thank you very, very much.
To start off, we would like to thank the school board for this award, as well as the March of Dimes organization, as it recognizes the amount of time and effort that the Newtown Middle School Student Council team of the 2014-2015 school year put into the Color Run fundraiser for this March of Dimes organization. I'd like to take a brief moment and explain what the March of Dimes organization is actually all about. The organization was founded by President Franklin Roosevelt in 1938, as he was an individual that suffered from polio during his presidency. The March of Dimes organization was originally built on the foundation of preventing the spread of polio in the United States, and they were able to successfully accomplish their goal with the aid of various physicians and researchers. The March of Dimes organization focuses now on birth defects, infant mortality, and the premature birth of children, and is constantly striving to give these infants a normal life, one that they deserve. The Color Run fundraiser that was held at Council Rock South was hosted to benefit this organization. Through the aid of sponsorships of various local businesses in the community, the student council team was able to raise over $3,000 for this organization. The run was 5 kilometers long in distance and was one in which powdered color were thrown at runners as they passed by. We had a great time organizing this event, especially because of the amount of benefit that many children received because of it. Once again, on behalf of Newtown Middle School, we would like to thank the school board as well as the March of Dimes organization for their time in this award.
Dr. Fraser, if you wouldn't mind coming around for a minute, I'd like to. Present this one to you, actually to you and Dr. Gross both. This is actually for Council Rock School District for being they were the 7th top team in Southeast Pennsylvania. And just to give you a comparison, that's competing against the Kmarts of the world, the Cignas of the world, the Toll Brothers of the world, all the corporate teams, and came in 7th, which is an amazing accomplishment. Again, it's something, again, it's been going on for a long time, and we certainly appreciate that wonderful tradition. So thank you very, very much. We appreciate your support. I guess I'll close with one real quick question for everybody is, how many folks here have been affected by the mission of the March of Dimes? Everybody should have their hand up, because everybody here has been affected by the March of Dimes. We prevented polio, had polio vaccines. When children are born, they have a heel stick to draw blood to test and see for metabolic disorders, which we advocated for to make sure that every metabolic disorder that had a way of resolving it would be tested for, and that now is the case in Pennsylvania. And the other thing that happens is a baby is given an APGAR score when they're born. They get it twice, and that was March of Dimes researcher Virginia APGAR that developed that. So it's something that's been going on for a long, long time. So keep that in mind. It's something that it does affect every single person, because we all start out as babies. So thank you very, very much. We appreciate your time and your support. And one final round of applause for Council Rock and for Newtown Middle.
Just really quickly, a shameless plug. Because we'd love to be here again next year, obviously. And so the run is actually Saturday, the 23rd. So we're having the run again. Starts at 9 o'clock registration. I've already set up links on our Newtown Middle School website for active.com, so you can sign up online. There's a Facebook page you can like, and we always put all the winners on there and the orders of the runners that come in. We are going to do it rain or shine. We also have a Zumbathon. One of our very own gym teachers, phys ed teachers, Kate Ortendahl, who was just hired, she's over at Hillcrest this year. She's going to be running the Zumbathon. She's amazing. She's adorable, and she does a great job. So, there's the Zumbathon piece too if you don't want to run. And that will be indoors if the weather is inclement. But also, I think that South is having a big fair, a big art, a big fundraiser, right? Yeah. So it's going to be a really fun day at South in general, just fundraising for their marching band, I believe, and for the March of Dimes. So I think it would be a really great thing to come out and support. So as usual, we're looking for local Newtown businesses. Last year we had 30 support us. So if anybody knows of any local businesses who would like to be on the back of our shirt and be part of our run this year, we would love it. And again, the link to this is also on the Newtown Middle School website. So, and we hope to see you again next year. Thank you so much.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And congratulations to Newtown Middle School. Absolutely. Very, very proud of you. Dr. Gross, congratulations and thank you.
We'll see you all on the 24th at the walk. So.
Absolutely.
I'd rather do the Zumbathon.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Smoose. Very much appreciated. And finally, from me, I want to let the public know that we've taken, as you know, a little bit of a hiatus as we've been collecting information on capital planning and also focusing on some pressing and important academic issues here in recent weeks. That we will be at our next board meeting 2 weeks from this evening, having a board discussion on some capital planning issues. So you can look forward to that 2 weeks from this evening on Thursday, March the 17th. And that ends my report. Thank you.
Remove public comment. Public comment is an opportunity for members of the public to address the board. We would ask that you limit your comments to no longer than 3 minutes. Please consider the fact that there may be young children in the audience or watching this broadcast live on CRTV when speaking. It is our goal to maintain a respectful environment so that members of our community have equal opportunity to address the board without interruption. While the board welcomes your ideas and will consider them deliberating an issue, we may not respond to your comments or questions. Do not have anyone on the list. Is there any public comment? Going once. Going twice. Okay. We will move on to items for board approval. Mr. Violet, if you could please read number 1.
I move to approve the revised minutes of the January 7th, 2016 school board meeting as contained in the attachment to this agenda.
Second.
I want to thank Kapua for reviewing that and adding some notes to those minutes.
Any other questions? Hearing no objections, I'd ask the secretary to record the motion is passing with unanimous consent. Please, Ms. Thomas, could you read number 2?
I move to accept the independent auditor's report for the fiscal year ended June 30th, 2015, as contained in the attachment to this agenda.
Second.
Mr. Reiner?
This item was discussed last week during the Finance Committee meeting. For the public's knowledge, we will have this audit, once it's been accepted by the board, up on the website tomorrow for you to be able to review the audit report. Again, it's a clean opinion, and the numbers that are in the audit are consistent with everything that we've been talking about with fund balance and everything throughout the year. If I have any questions, if you have any questions, I can answer.
Mr. Reiner?
Hey, so I've got a copy. Thanks for giving it to me. And I watched the meeting on YouTube. It was awesome. But so on page 19, where it lists the total government fund balances, I'm just trying to understand what we're seeing there. And I'll wait for you to get there.
Page 18?
19. Is that it? You got it? Is that right? 19? You see it? So it says that
I think you're looking at the balance sheet governmental funds. Is that what you're looking at?
that's right.
It's, I think, page 18.
Well,
it's 2 pages.
18.
Well, we can go over the numbers, the same numbers. We can definitely discuss it.
Well, so what I'm seeing is on a page where it says $62.2 million at the top. That says total governmental fund balances. And then it has 183.5 million.
Oh, you're looking at this?
Yeah.
Oh,
It has a 19 on the bottom of the page.
What happens is it's in the PDF because of the headers and stuff.
Right.
The PDF synchronization is not to the page.
actually, he's looking at the reconciliation between the governmental fund level statements and the top level entity-wide perspective. So yeah, now I get it.
Okay. So what's the $62.2 million figure? What does that refer to?
If you go on the previous page,
Okay.
that is showing all the fund balances for not just the general fund, but also the capital projects fund. So we have $32 million for the capital project funds that we will be spending for the rest of Goodnow and also for the middle schools.
But that number's, obviously, this was done in June 30. That number's significantly different now because we went out for.
Yes, yes.
Right. And then the 183.5 million?
That is what it says. It's the capital assets used in the governmental activities, not financial resources, and therefore are not reporting the governmental funds. That is the net value of our fixed assets is basically on the fund level statements. We're going to be getting into
It's
some
not
real
our
technical
it's not our
areas.
buildings, right, Chris?
It's the net effect of our buildings. It's
Okay, it's-
because we're
yes.
depreciating them because it's the economic resource measurement focus at the top level statement. So therefore, we're going on a full accrual basis, which includes depreciation, everything. The fund level statements or the net financial resource, current financial resource measurement focus, and therefore it's the modified accrual basis of accounting. So this is going from the full accrual basis of accounting to the modified accrual basis of accounting, and that's what this is describing.
But as we go, as we hire someone to evaluate our property and buildings, that's a number that's likely to change.
That could change, yes.
Okay. And then the big new arrival to the scene in this audit versus everyone that's ever occurred in the past is the minus $495.7 million entry. That when you add all of our assets means that the district is actually a net negative minus a negative $245.5 million.
If you are looking at the long-term economic resource measurement focus, which is very different than the fund level focus, we are now looking at the unfunded liability. The effect of this is the unfunded liability of the retirement system. A portion of that is now on our financial statements at the top level. I would tell you there's no school district, no government entity that is funding that up front, though. So this is not something, every school district in the state of Pennsylvania is going to look like this, not any different, yes.
But it's not pretty, right? I mean, it does reflect a real liability that we face to the tune of about $500 million. That means that we are net worth negative $245 million.
Yes.
Okay. That's new. That's a big change.
And
I just want to make sure you know that this is not fund balance. It is not the way we budget. It is not the way we're evaluated. It is a long-term look, economic resource measurement focus.
It's like a balance sheet, though. That I mean, from those of us who look at balance sheets, it's more like that, right? I mean, it has long and short-term liabilities kind of built in.
It's got long-term liabilities involved in there that we, as a government, do not fund them upfront as you would in a business that is looking at the economic resource measurement focus.
That doesn't impact credit rating at all.
No. At this point, it does not affect the credit rating.
Bob, the 400 and some odd million that Bill spoke of, is that inclusive? And it's really a silly thing that new process. Is that inclusive of the 331 million, which is figured to be our proportionate share of the liability for the pension? That's
Yes.
maintained by the state.
Yes.
So when we look at that 400, I didn't get the number offhand, it's 459, I think you said.
Oh, it's 500 million.
Okay, 495, sorry, dyslexic. 495, 331 million of that is a calculated value. If the state were to totally fail and go belly up, that presumably we would have a $331 million liability for the pensions. It's unlikely. It is really a GASB, Government Accounting Standards Bureau convention, which is also a relatively new creation that we track it at that level. It's almost nonsensical.
Yes, what it is our portion of the $48 billion that the state pension fund is underfunded. And
So I just wanted to count it off that, Bill is right. There's a 495, 331 of that is artificial, fictitious because it's, covered by the state. It's not fictitious, but it's an accounting transfer, leaving, there may be others of similar ilk in the calculation.
Is that right? Because that's not how I understood it. And I understood the way Bob just said it, that's representative of our portion, absent the state's portion. So I just want to be clear of what that number represents. Is that just Council Rock's, or is that, as Jerry said, we're covering both the Council Rock and the state's portion?
right now, our contributions are made up, we get reimbursed by the state for 50% and we pay 50%. That is the full amount. That is, both shares of it is what that calculation is. It isn't just our share. So the state isn't holding another 300 million out there. That is a combined
That's
total.
Total
And we're
liability
all,
for our employees.
yes.
Any other questions, Mr. Reinhardt? Roll call vote, please.
I would love to go over the top level statements with you guys if you really want to get into this more, because I don't want any misconception or anything here. I just want to really make sure that you understand it. And I'd have to get up there and show you on the board and show all the things that are going on in these
that's what-
statements.
That's what we did in committee, right?
Pardon me?
That's what we did in committee.
We really need to go over the top level statements as closely as I would if you really want to get into it and understand the differences between the two. And I'd be willing to do that. I just want to make sure that this isn't something that people think it is an accounting issue. It isn't anything that's changed in our financials this year.
I mean, the only reason I brought it up was
Yeah.
to highlight that GASB rules have changed.
Yeah.
But there is a real liability out there. And now we're putting it on our books, and we hadn't in the past. And
Yes.
it helps us confront a real pressing issue that has to be dealt with. Hopefully at the state level, but we don't see them doing it.
Yes.
But it shows up in black and white right here as a massive negative number in net worth of the district. So I think it's important. It is real. It's a real liability.
I agree with you.
And now we own it.
I agree with you, but I just want to make sure this is very different conversation than how we're budgeting, and the conversations we have about budget is not directly affected by this.
Go back to that roll call vote, please.
Okay. Mrs. Brooks?
Yes.
Dr. Foster?
Yes.
Mr. Grubb?
Yes.
Mrs. McKessie?
Yes.
Mr. Tate?
Yes.
Mrs. Thomas?
Yes.
Dr. Thorwart?
Yes.
Mr. Block?
Yes.
Mr. Violet?
Yes.
Motion passes 9-0. Ms. Brooks, please do number 3.
I move to approve the amendment to the KU Champions LLC agreement for a 2-year extension extending August 31st, 2018, as set forth in the attachment to this agenda, subject to solicitor's review.
Second.
Thank you. This is also something we discussed. Finance, Mr. Blake?
Yes.
At about 6 o'clock this evening, I have the most revised amendment. Mr. Cox had recommended a couple of revisions, and I have the most revised copy, and Mr. Rice has them as well.
Anybody have any questions for?
No, but for the benefit of people who are watching, do you want to just give a little summary of what this actually means?
Yeah, the current contract that we have is scheduled to expire, and what we wanted to do is to move forward with the contract with Champions, which will allow us to not only have the before and after school program for families, but also the kindergarten enrichment program that we offer in the morning at 3 different schools in our district as well. It's a service that parents really do appreciate and the children do enjoy, and it really does help out the community.
And so information about this enrichment, the process and everything will be posted on the website?
Yes, it will.
And will that be available when they come into the schools to register their students?
The flyers will be dropped off tomorrow and sent to all the schools available for kindergarten registration starting on March 8th.
And in the event that these enrichment sections fill up, we keep a wait list?
Champions keeps a wait list.
Okay.
Yes.
And at the time that, when we get through the summer, if we were to have available space in our buildings, because enrollment and sections and things worked out as such, would there be a possibility that we could extend our offerings and fill spaces off of the wait list?
Yes, we anticipate having conversations. We're going to take a look at our enrollment numbers for next year, what kindergarten numbers look like, and see what our space looks like across all 10 schools.
Can you also just give me an idea? I mean, we have a coordinated, concerted kindergarten enrollment date, March 8th, right?
Mhm.
But really, people enroll all the time. Do we know, like, historically, what percentage of our kindergarten students actually enroll? Like, how reliable are the numbers that we'll get next week be in predicting our sections? Do you know the answer to that?
No, I don't. In fact, actually, over the last couple of years, there have been enrollments where it has even been current families, and they didn't come during those initial registration days, but they came much later on. So
maybe in those first 3 days, it's a good indicator, but not a final indicator.
I would like to see, like in the listserv, something done, because there's two things that happen with it. One is, some people, are slow to register, and that impacts our ability to create sections. But then we had situations in the past where people didn't register, and then we had to apply our policy where if a section was capped, you had to go to a sister school. And then there was a lot of conversation, oh, I didn't know, I could have registered earlier, I didn't realize. I would like to see the messaging really, really clear about why it is so important. It's one thing for households that move into the district, don't have the proof of residence, and they settle on their houses later. But for people who are living here, if they have students, even if they're considering going to a private school and they're not sure, the importance of getting on our rolls prior really to June 30th is really important. And I don't know that that message is as strong or as clear as it should be. So I'd like to just see that messaging targeted.
Absolutely. I think that's a great point. So Mr. McClay, let's make sure it's on our website in terms of central registration. And we will, Ms. Brooks, also make sure it's part of our listservs that are coming up. We can even attach that administrative regulation that pinpoints that June 30th date
Can I
and put it right out there for folks.
add a suggestion for a couple of these important topics? So I think that's one I also, which I'll talk in board comments about, thinking the conversation around redistricting and capital planning. I would love to see a single topic listserv that says parents of kindergartens September 2016, and just that information. So everybody else can ignore it, because I agree. I've talked to people. At first I was going to say they might even be on a listserv, the people we're trying to get. But additionally, people get bombarded, as we all do, with emails, and they judge on the subject line, and a Council Rock update goes into, I want to read it, but I'm not reading it at this minute, saved pile, which maybe gets read and maybe doesn't. If it says parents of kindergarten students September 16, and I am one, I'm reading it. So I would just suggest that a couple of the critical, that aren't just general updates that we maybe do a single topic. We can't send them out every day, which is, I know why we group topics together. But I would say for that topic and redistricting, I personally would like to see a very targeted message.
We can do that. Thanks.
Mr. McClay? In our conversation, we spoke about the current percentage which this organization contributes of their net to the district. I believe it's not 15%?
13.
13%. There was discussion about asking to move it to 15%. Have we done anything on that realm?
No, we have not.
The second thing, because that was one, the second thing goes to the questions that Denise and Wendy were bringing up. In the town I grew up in the other end of the state, they used to do a census in the summer. They actually used to hire high school students to go door to door to do a census. And I asked the question because of this, which is, one, it would allow us to almost pre-register or acknowledge that for students who aren't in kindergarten yet, either when they're 2 or 3, that we would know they're there, to be proactive, because the listserv is great, but only if you knew enough to be on the listserv. So, it's like using the radio to tell people that somebody's lost their radio. It only works if they have the radio. So I just wonder, how did that community, which was a residential community, do a census? Or do we need to think ahead to say, to begin our active listing of children sooner, so that I would sooner send a notice to a household where the child had moved or the family had moved, but I knew of them as a 2-year-old, than to have them frozen out. So I asked that question. That was it. I just was, how do we do the census, and could we register or invite people to register their children, not register, but to list, acknowledge, come up with a good word, their children sooner, so we know they're there. Because I'm really concerned, a lot of our listserv doesn't get out to parents whose children aren't in school yet. Oh, I know what the other was. There was another concern. And the census would also allow us, we have a state mandated obligation regarding the supervision of children who are homeschooled. And that state mandated, one, we have to know they exist. And two, we do have to have some periodic review of curriculum. And I don't know how we do that now. If the children, how do we know of a child who exists if they're not going to our schools? How do we know? And if they're not using our transportation, how do we know?
Dr. Lambert?
I don't know that we would know that they exist. We do have a process in place where families have to file paperwork with the district on an annual basis if they're homeschooling their child. And there is information about there, if the child has a disability and what the curriculum is. Clearly, there could be someone out there being homeschooled that we would not know about, but there is a process in place that they are to register with us.
So I just put forward the idea, but what would it take to do a census, or for us to do that a little more proactively earlier on so we'd know about that? Just so we do the right thing for our liability and also for the children of the district. The thought.
One more point, just to note that on February 4th, the Courier Times put information about our kindergarten registration.
That's a good thing. If I may, one of the things we could also think about doing is trying to target some communication directly to daycare providers in the area. And it seems to me we would also want to focus on elementary schools, which would be the elementary school populations, of course, would be more likely to have prospective kindergartners than otherwise.
They're more likely to read the listserv too.
That's a good point.
You know, there was a preschool council at one time. Joe, was it like before Joy? There was a preschool council where someone from the district met with many of the directors. Chuck, you remember this?
I do. That was me.
Oh, I remember a lady with gray hair.
Actually, it was. I won't go into the whole context, but yes, Joy and I did periodically invite them to come in. We talked about issues such as what we expect for kids, would like to see kids coming in with, what they're teaching the kids, but we probably haven't done that in 2 or 3 years.
What about Becasey, Chuck?
I'm sorry?
Becasey? Bucks County Association?
Yeah, there's an organization, yes.
I just, it's one of those things. I'm not trying to be intrusive, and if they don't know, I'm going to go, but it is a great coordination to make that coordination.
I have a comment regarding the outreach to the daycare centers. So Champions charges a fee to the parents that bring their kids to the enrichment programs. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yes, that's correct.
Right, and it's a nonprofit organization.
I don't believe so.
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't want to see us advertising or spending money advertising to daycare centers to bring in somebody into an enrichment program.
No,
Or you
for
just talked about
kindergarten.
kindergarten?
Kindergarten.
Oh, okay, very good.
But I'm not sure they'll want to do it, just to follow up on your thought, because they may run kindergarten programs. So, but doesn't hurt to let them know.
And in reference to Jerry's question about the homeschooling kids, is it second grade that you have to register, or is it first grade?
I believe it's age of beginners is a requirement for registration, and I believe that's age 6, 7.
Okay. So that might, there might be a pool of people that are not interested in having their kids in kindergarten anyway, regarding the census, whether they're going to continue homeschooling or not. Just a thought.
No, I absolutely agree. My point was just that we know who exists and that we're fulfilling our obligations.
So we're still on the champions issue, right? Okay, so it's a 2-year extension in the contract. We are going to continue to talk about capital planning. This is a use of our space. And so I was interested in how do we get out of the contract if suddenly we analyze our space and this just isn't going to work at this level.
60 days.
Right.
It's 90.
So
It's 90 days, and it's in the, I looked for that particular provision, and it's in the original contract executed a number of years ago, which is being extended. So it's a 90-day right to get out on both sides of the contract. Either party can exercise that right.
Great, and I mean, that would be awkward for 90 days. It could even be within a school year. So, I mean, it would be very awkward for them, but if push came to shove and we needed the space, we can get it back.
That's correct. Within the school year, at any time during the year, that termination provision is exercisable.
Thank you. Any last questions? Have a roll call vote, please.
Mrs. McKessie?
Yes.
Mr. Tate?
Yes.
Mrs. Thomas?
Yes.
Dr. Thorwart?
Yes.
Mr. Block?
Yes.
Mr. Bialik?
Yes.
Mrs. Brooks?
Yes.
Dr. Foster?
Yes.
Mr. Grubb?
Yes.
Passes 9-0. Mr. Grubb, can I get you to read the last one, please?
Sure, why not? I move to award the Fortinet Network Security Bid 1618 to Integra One at a total cost not to exceed $94,809, subject to audit.
Second.
Ms. Brooks, any questions for Mr. Fredericks? Frederick, quick overview of what we're doing.
We're just upgrading, well, actually, we're replacing our firewall and our content engine.
This is obligated by federal law,
The content engine is required by federal and state law, yes.
and is there any funding from the state or federal government to fulfill the mandate that they gave us?
No.
Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Bialik?
Yes.
Mrs. Brooks?
Yes.
Dr. Foster?
Yes.
Mr. Grubb?
Yes.
Mrs. McKessie?
Yes.
Mr. Tate?
Yes.
Mrs. Thomas?
Yes.
Dr. Thorwart?
Yes.
Mr. Block?
Yes, motion passes 9-0. We move to board items. Is there any old business? Is there any new business?
Can I ask a question, Andy?
No offense. Yes, you may.
Well, I just wanted to throw something out there, and I'm not stuck on it, but as Dr. Frazier was talking about the discussion of capital planning, I wonder if anybody would be interested in considering that instead of trying to bundle that with actual board business, that we set aside a night. I know it's an extra night. I'm not advocating for more nights out for all of us, but that we set aside the night and advertise it for the public, and we keep it its own thing. It's if we're going to sit here for 3 or 4 hours, there doesn't have to be an end, such a close end time. It gives us more time to discuss just that. I'm not talking about regularly. I'm talking one time to have more time to talk about it as a group in the public.
I would consider that. Additionally, I think that the communication has to include some of the ideas that have been tossed around so people understand. I've recently spoken to several groups who think they will, under any condition, anything we vote on not be impacted. And I don't believe that to be true. I don't know what the percentages are, and I don't think they know. But when someone's chances of being personally impacted elevate, their attention goes to it. And my concern is that some people currently are not paying as close attention because they have perceived that they somehow got the message, believe it or not, from us, which I don't think we did, that some portion is not. And I think that the communication needs to be very clear about, we're talking about a full redistricting impacting every elementary school in the district, that, you know, potentially closing down Richboro, obviously, and maybe what to do with the space. I'm just throwing out topics that we've talked about in the past. Redistricting, which elementary schools feed to which middle schools, which go to which high schools. So people are literally, these are the topics that have been discussed in the past. They may or may not be top, you know, depending on the will of the board. I get that. But I think just advertising that we're having yet another capital planning meeting after we talked about capital for a year straight. Some people are tuning out saying, it's not going to impact me. My school's full, not over full, not under full. I'm good. And then something's going to happen, and they're, you know, rightfully or wrongfully going to say they weren't communicated to. So
is your point more about the?
My point was really more about the communication, but I think it's a little bit,
Understand what we're doing?
it's a little bit tied to Ms. McKessie's point in that this is a big, huge conversation. I don't know whether we're going to take votes or we're just going to express opinions on it, but I don't I think it needs the proper amount of attention, time, which I think was more, and communication so the public knows. I think that we discuss something, we lean towards it, we move in that direction, and then we're gonna have a room full of people. And having sat through the 1.5 years of meetings for the Richboro Middle School split, I'm just asking for as much as we can possibly do, and then people will still say they didn't hear from us, but as much as we possibly do to warn people what the tone of and the tenor of the conversation is going to be.
Can I? So I agree with both of them, but so we're on the clock because we have to vote on these bids for the middle schools pretty soon. And so there's that issue that was an anxiety for some of us. Is there a plan that is physically realizable and backable by the administration that leads to these middle schools opening with reasonable capacities? And so, for instance, we had been presented with, if we do nothing, one of the middle schools will open at 96% capacity. That sounds a little kooky to me. But if we move Richboro Elementary to the north, then suddenly that 96 becomes a 92%. That sounds like okay, but what I don't know is there enough backing? That may not be the eventual plan, but it is at least one plan. And would there be enough backing on the board that, yeah, we could do that? Then I would know that there was a possible path forward for going ahead on these middle schools that could happen. And that's what I need in order to vote. So that's what I wanted that mean. Then this capital planning stuff for redistricting and all this, I think we have to keep at it, because what can happen is if we decide to close an elementary school, we have to make that decision in like November or thereabouts, December or somewhere. It's
Yes.
And so
By the end of the year.
if we haven't done any work to say what possible sending boundaries could be, there'll be people on this board that may be advocating to close the school, and there'll be other people on the board saying, I don't even know what that means. I have no idea what the implications of that would be, because we haven't actually drawn any potential maps, whether they're politically realizable or physically realizable or educational program realizable. We would have nothing. So in order to set up for a potential conversation next December, we should at least have some outlines.
So the intent of the conversation on the 17th was, number one, to get ahead of the vote that we have to take on the 7th round of bids, to make sure that we have plenty of time to discuss it. Putting aside the idea of having a separate meeting, I think that the goal of whatever meeting we had would be to have a discussion around direction provided to the administration to get us comfortable with the things that we might be uncomfortable with. I don't think we're going to solve everything between now and the 7th in terms of drawing boundaries, but in order to align on what the timeline to do that might be. So as an example, if the middle schools are slated to open in 18, right, fall of 18, we might talk about what's the appetite of the board to do more than one redistricting. And if we don't have that appetite to do more than one redistricting, that might point to the fact that in the 18 school year, that's when the redistricting would happen. That's when we would have to have a plan for the elementary schools, a plan for Richboro, and we could walk out of, now, between now and then, understanding how we had to work backwards, what that timeline for doing things like working with the community to look at different boundaries might look like. So that the intent was to have us understand what the timeline of activities would be around some big rules. So it's a continuation of that conversation we had where Dr. Fraser asked for some direction. So, that's the point of what the discussion on the 17th would be. Now, I'm curious, though, having raised it, is there an appetite to do that as a separate meeting?
Can I just interject quickly before you go back to surveying the board? And it's really just to piggyback on those two pieces. Andy just hit the nail on the head in terms of what I see as the purpose of that. One is timeline, right? So what we have been talking about is having these changes take effect for the 2017-2018 school year. As we all know, as our public knows, we took this bit of a hiatus, this bit of a break here in the recent weeks. There's nothing there to stop us from still pursuing the 2017-2018 school year. We also know, though, that we have some competing academic needs that we have been very aggressively and successfully tending to. There's a conversation there, and then that also then lays on top of this idea of, do we want to have just one redistrict, or do we want to have multiple redistricts, given that the middle schools will open for the 2018-2019 school year. So there's a conversation to be had there. So that's a huge piece of this conversation. And the second piece, as Andy said, is this board has a very significant vote coming up on April 7th in terms of these two middle school projects. And this cabinet wants to make sure that you are equipped with all the information, all the knowledge, and that you are thoroughly prepared to make a comfortable vote, regardless of what your vote is. So it seems appropriate for us to engage in a level of discourse around these topics, both from a timeline standpoint for K to 6, as well as at the secondary level. And then to Dr. Foster's point around, okay, so what are the potential scenarios around capacity? And Dr. Foster, I believe last time you also talked about even the status of Richboro Middle School. So I believe that we can talk about that on March 17th. That really is the essence of that discussion. I don't see those conversations taking all that long. If we want to schedule a separate evening, by all means, that's fine with me. I don't see it being as time consuming, however, say as October 1st was when we first launched.
We might get
A lot of information.
If we communicate
Yeah,
the
for
right
sure.
way to discuss the point.
So I think either way is
Want to weigh in before we
sure.
talk to them, so, yeah.
Either way is fine.
So I think timeline is concerning of people, but the real thing that people come out for, right, is you're going to move me, or you're going to move some part of my school to some other place, and what's that going to look like? And so if I'm confused
And why?
about what decisions we're making
And
when.
I think we
and-
need to tell them why as well.
Yeah, I agree, but I don't think we're going to have every street drawn.
No.
But if we're going to say, and a whole elementary school is going to go to a different high school, which has been suggested
As one option.
as one option, and there's going to be some indication that that's the tolerance of the board at this meeting, there are people in that school that's been discussed that don't even know that. So I'm just saying I would want those people to be here and to know that it might not be a firm voted action. I'm not sure, based on what I'm hearing you guys say. If that's the leaning of the board and that causes people to vote yes on middle schools, then people need to know that if they want to advocate for, against, or up or down, that kind of conversation is going to exist and have time to come out and talk about it.
So your point is more about how we communicate the meeting that we're going to have to drive maximum attendance.
To give people an opportunity, I mean, even if we're not voting, if we're going to go around the table and say, this is the way I'm leaning, and that causes people to make a decision that they do vote for the following month, it's a fait accompli. It feels disingenuous, frankly. If we're all going to sit here and say, oh, well, yeah, I moved to elementary school, and then in 2 years, we're not going to do it. I don't think anybody on this board would do that. But people won't understand by just saying we're having a capital planning discussion, that decision in essence could get made that night.
Right, so all I'm saying is that you're concerned that we communicate very clearly to the
What's
public.
going to get decided?
Once we decide if we're going to do it on the 17th or do it on another night, we need to help people understand that
The
everybody
magnitude
could
of the
be-
decisions.
Could be the fact that it's going to be a great discussion, and we want as many people to attend and provide input as we possibly can. Good luck, Gordon.
I'll take you one step further. We've talked about moving an elementary school to a different middle school. I don't know how we do that until we decide who's going to be in that elementary school and how many of them to move forward. It's all related.
So
It's
to that
all-
point, but we're saying we're not going to have that done. So we're going to have to make that's why we're not going to be able to take a vote, right? Because we're not going to know this street goes here and that street goes, you can't vote until but generally philosophically, are we willing to say this is how I thought the conversation was going to go. The population is populace at the elementary school. You're going to have to make some go with it. Are you willing to vote to move that elementary school to balance out the high school?
Well, you would have to decide, are you going to keep all your elementary schools open or not?
Okay, so I don't
Those
see
decisions are
any
not
of
gonna happen.
that. I do not see any of that being part of the conversation on March 17th. I see the conversation being what I expressed a couple minutes ago. One is what's our overall timeline for the scope of this work, and two is what would be the status of Richboro Middle School, which in my eyes is purely a capacity issue. What are the number of seats that we have at the new Holland? What are the number of seats that we have at the new Newtown? And how many students do we have, and how many students are we projected to have? And therefore, are we able or are we not able to close Richboro Middle School?
It's a strategic discussion.
I don't want to get ahead of that because I think it's premature to get ahead of that.
But I'm about to spend $100 million. And so I, for myself, in order to make this vote, I need to know that even though we're not necessarily going to move Richboro Elementary to the north, it's been described as something that could work so that our middle schools would not magically open on day one with 96% capacity. If I knew that they were going to open at 96% capacity, I'm not that interested in building these two middle schools that way, because then maybe Richboro Middle has to stay open. So I personally, independent of what the public needs, I need to have a sense that there's enough people on this board that, if push comes to shove, I would be in preference of moving Richboro Elementary to the north than having a middle school at 96% capacity. Whatever Mr. Frazier wants, Dr. Frazier, it's for me. It's my vote. So that's what I'm asking.
Well, that's
my
why I
colleagues.
was making the point I was making.
And that's it. So I can.
And I think that was your point.
I
This
could
is a
do it
long,
tonight. I could do it at that meeting. I can do it.
but you can't do it at that meeting
All
unless
right, hang
people
on,
do a
let's-
lot of
let's-
work
Let's just stop.
and have the answers.
Let's try and go one at a time here, Mrs. Brooks, if you want.
Well, what I was going to say is, it has been so long since we as a board or even within the community have talked about this. So I don't think, I think it's fine to keep the 17th as taking place here. Let's sort of like that's like the restart of previous conversation. And that is going to be the basis to help us determine, do we need public meetings, additional meetings? That will take the tone of that. But I feel like we are so removed from the zone of those conversations that I view March 17 as the reboot and getting us back into it. But I do agree with Bill, but I'm not stuck on the 96% of middle schools. That's important, but I'm not stuck on that because the truth is I can't even reconcile that, knowing that when my kids were in that school, there were 300 more students in the building, and the building's going to be bigger after the renovation.
Right.
But the bigger issue for me is the high school. So it is the middle school, but it's the high school. I cannot personally be comfortable with a redistricting that does not address fixing the enrollments of the high schools. The fact that our high school that has 15 more classrooms, north, that has 15 more classrooms than south, is 400 students less, I can't reconcile it. That has to be addressed. And the way to address that, obviously, is through the middle schools. So for me, in the path to move forward on the middle schools, it has to all come together. I have to have faith that we are going to address that, the middle schools and therefore the high schools, before I'm in a place to be comfortable to go down this path of $100 million. So, but to backstep to the issue that I think we were trying to address, I do not see the need for the separate meeting prior to the 17th. Let the 17th sort of establish the ground rules, understand the timeline of what that's going to look forward, so that people can understand. I feel like if we have a separate meeting prior to the 17th, it's based on all this old information, on a lot of rumors and things that are going around. So let the 17th sort of establish things, get people caught up to what's real, what's not real, let the community know more of what the truths are, because I'm sure this is the case for you. I'm addressing so many things that aren't true, and so I just feel like it wouldn't be productive to have that separate meeting first. That's going to come later. We're probably going to have lots and lots of meetings. But for me, the 17th would be a great place to just reestablish where we're at.
17th is
Sorry, Mr.
before
Governor.
the vote on
Mr.
bids.
Governor, please.
It's a time critical.
Bill, please.
You know, so
Mr. Governor.
that's a
Bill,
general.
Bill, I'm sorry.
No, I'm sorry, that's a general meeting.
Bill,
So
Bill, you don't have the
that's
floor.
general.
Bill, you don't have the floor. Mr. Governor, please.
I'm scheduled to be out of town on the 17th. The reason I mention that is there have been various persons on the board who have said that unless they have this information, they're not going to vote to move forward around the two middle schools. For me, you know, I'll agree with Denise from the perspective of I really need to look at whatever we're doing more appropriately, I think, through the lens of what does it get us to the high school, and then filter that down, kind of a trickle-down analysis. I don't want to get to a position where we get into this analysis paralysis. You know, I had a very lovely meeting with maybe 15, 16 people who came from my little neck of the woods. They came to meet with me one morning at the bakery. And one of them brought up a point which was interesting. She said, well, there's a disparity in the number of males and females in a grade. It was an interesting point. I had never considered it. But like facets on a diamond, it takes a long time to polish to get a diamond because there are 57 facets on a diamond. We cannot work in 57 different facets in trying to get the schools right. It's just not going to work because it's just not going to work. We have to work at some grosser level in how many facets we're going to deal in. So you're right. Total quantity at the high school, that's one facet, I think. Division of high school, certainly a facet I can address. To the other end, probably the number of children in one grade. I'm not diminishing what the person's observation was, but it's because I would get it right for second grade, and the next second grade, it would be wrong. So for me, coming into this, I'm not so hung up on the percent utilization of the middle schools. Because the second thing I'm going to tell you, and this may be heresy for some people, is I'm not hung up on the idea that we're going to redistrict one year and it's going to be perfect for the next 7. I think we're going to have to look at it and adjust. And in that fluidity, we'll get most of the other facets covered as best we can. I don't want to redistrict every year because I think that gives no stability. But I think we need a horizon. We spoke just the other week about giving people some horizon. When's school going to start? In 3 years, in 2 years, so they have a horizon. We need to redistrict a little more regularly than every 16, 17 years. But we need to do it on a horizon. So for right now, I think the middle schools, they do need to be built. I think that's where we come to for me. So I'm good with building the middle schools. I'm good with balancing out what we think the high schools are now. And I think we have to just look at a 4-year horizon and a running horizon. 4 is arbitrary, it could be 3, it could be 5. And let people know that it's peripheral. And just word of the wise, my final comment on the thing is, folks, if you're buying your house, if you're thinking of living in Council Rock, don't buy your house based on it going to one school, because that's not a guarantee this district, this board, any of its predecessors have ever extended to anyone that your house will go to this school. Your children will have an eligibility to go to Council Rock schools. That's what we guarantee by state law.
So if I could, I want to go around the table because the topic here was the understanding. It's great we're having a discussion, but the question was more around when do we have this discussion versus having it tonight. So I want to just poll the board to see if there's an appetite to do it outside the 17th. Ms. Thomas, do you have what's your opinion?
We are only going to talk.
I'm sorry, if it's another night, then Dr. Fraser and I will coordinate.
Okay. If it's, as Dr. Fraser said, if we're just going to really talk about the general timeline and RMS, I'm okay to have that on the 17th. I think it's going to be challenging to keep the conversation to that. I would be in a full favor of us, though, scheduling and already having a date for a full-on public meeting so that we could even announce it that night.
I just want to clarify, since I started all of this, to respectfully, Dr. Fraser, to say that it's this and this, and it won't take that long, because I know you guys just want this and this on the 17th, and I understand that, but I have been sensing that there are board members that need more. And my real intent was so that we don't disappoint here in the respect of you're coming in, you're going to be thinking that you're getting one thing. We will have to be so corralled to keep that conversation. And I'm great with the 17th. I have no problem with that. To keep that conversation to just that, because just this has become something entirely different. And there's board members saying they can't wrap their head around it with something else. And I think we all needed to just hear that from everybody. People need to have whatever they need to have in order to vote. And I don't know that and it's not that it hasn't been provided. It is, to Dr. Foster's point, it is a sense of where everybody else on this board is going and what everybody's willing to do. So I just don't want you disappointed that you're going to come in and we are not necessarily, and maybe everybody would, but we're not necessarily equipped without planning at least those conversations at a later date. I'm fine with the 17th. I have no problem, and I don't have a need to drag everybody out an additional night. But I think at some point, we're going to have 4 and 5 hour long conversations.
Okay, Denise, no, your preference. Mr. Pilot, any preference for a separate meeting?
Yeah, I think we're going to need a separate meeting, but I think I'm very happy that we're re-engaging on the 17th before we put any shovels in the ground on these 2 projects. You've heard my objections all along, so just to begin the conversation again, I think is vital. And if we do nothing else but start down that path on the 17th, I think it's an absolute win.
I'm going to agree with Mark. 17's fine. You want to start there, but we're going to need a lot more. So,
Yeah, I think the plan for the 17th, as you described and Dr. Fraser described, is a good one. But I do think we need a special meeting after the 17th. And I think that can be planned on the 17th as we lay out the timeline for this process. And I think, to Wendy's point, capital planning doesn't really convey the message about the likely redistricting. And I think we need to start communicating that right away so that people know that the discussion will be starting on the 17th. And to Jerry's point, I could say tonight or on the 17th that, yes, I'm open to this elementary school being redistricted to this middle school, but that doesn't really mean anything until we have a holistic integrated plan. And I think, the redistricting issue is one we have to start talking about immediately, and people have to know that it's absolutely driven by the new middle schools. But that's going to be a long process that we're going to lay out on the 17th. So yes, I love the idea of a special meeting after the 17th.
Any opposition? Dr. Foster?
I'll just say the meeting as described on the 17th does nothing to help me on my vote, 0. The issue is a very simple one. It's the split to the middle schools, which is then the split to the high schools. And if we cannot, as a board, operate at that simple 2-chunk level and say, I get it. We have these many regular ed schools, regular ed students, we have these many elementary schools. We're not going to build a bunch of new elementary schools. I can move these chunks around without having to go out there and draw a bunch of district lines. I can see that by moving these chunks around, I can get to a pretty even split, or I can't see that because no one wants to move this chunk from there to there. So if that's the case, then I can't understand that this project is going to result in a 2 middle school system. That's what I'm after. So the conversation as described, as proposed for the 17th, is one that could occur a month from now or 2 months from now. It has no impact on the bids and having to vote on them. So that's what I wanted. Show me that there's enough consensus on this board to divide up these schools that we have in such a way that we can actually close a middle school and have reasonable capacities in 2 middle schools. That's all I wanted. It's not complicated. It doesn't sound like I'm going to get it at this meeting.
Well, I thought that was originally going to be part of the March 31st facilities meeting.
Yeah, we wanted to get out in front of that. This is a chance to start the conversation. I don't necessarily agree with you, but this is about the meeting date versus the discussion. So, Mr. Grubb, is there any?
I'm absent. I'm at Phillies. So
Can I just say something?
I'll catch up.
Okay, so the other thing to think about is that we're in budget season and we've got a lot of energy and effort to put around there. So just to be transparent for the public's sake, we have a short agenda tonight. There was some thought about potentially adding capital planning to this agenda because we had the time. We opted not to do that for preparation purposes. We want to make sure that we're able to guide a good conversation here. We feel like we can potentially do that on the 17th. So Dr. Fraser and I, with this input, are now going to go back and try and craft an agenda and a discussion that helps us start to move down that road and get way out in front of the conversation that happens on the 31st and then ultimately the vote on the 7th.
And wasn't it the case also that we didn't want to rush capital planning into tonight's agenda because it would be unfair to the public to do that without sufficient prior notice?
Exactly. So we want to make sure we communicate to folks that we're going to start talking about this again. We've got a big vote coming up. We want to talk about it a couple of times, but certainly we just need to be respectful of the administration's time as we move through budget season and do this. But I think we're going to get to a point where we talk about big ideas, 17th, 31st.
Okay, but I agree with Bill because I do not support this sort of if you build it, they will come approach, which I think to some degree is what happened at Holland Elementary. We have a building that was built, we spent $17 million, and we've had many years where it's below capacity that we need to address. I don't want that for these high schools. I don't want that for these middle schools. And so I would like to see on the 17th, it's not a commitment of who goes where, but I would like to hear from my board colleagues that they believe that the balancing of the high schools needs to be addressed, that they're committed, that there's a commitment to that. There's an understanding that that is a problem that needs to be addressed, because that would give me the confidence that as you roll it back, that how we populate the middle schools will address that. It doesn't have to be specifically who, what, where, but I need that confidence because it sometimes feels like this, if you build it, they will come, and I don't have faith in that. And so this is a lot of money, and we need to do this planning and committing to how we approach it and the philosophy of redistricting before we can get to the nitty-gritty of who specifically.
And the intent is for us to do that and balance that with the other priorities that the administration has. So we're going to
Yes.
start down that road. So because of the feedback that we've gotten through the public and as board members have been to start the capital planning, just restart that. So that is exactly what the intent is.
But I'd like to see that if we can talk about that on the 17th, because we're running out of time.
I think we have to talk about big ideas and start to hone those down so we can get to the 7th where everybody will be comfortable. So that's what I anticipate we will be talking about. But
I don't want to delay this discussion a minute, and I appreciate the fact that we're going to be having it. Just remind me again the importance of the calendar date, April 7th, and why the vote has to be held then.
because we're voting on the bids.
I understand that we're voting on the bids. I understand why, I understand, but why is that timeline set for April 7th? Why can't we do it May 7th, June 7th, July 7th, and have these conversations? I'll make a motion right now that we delay these projects for 6 months. I have no problem with that. I'll make a motion that we.
You won't delay them 6 months, you'll delay them a year.
I'm okay with that. So I'll second that motion.
Sir?
You can't both make them second it. You can't do
We'll
that.
see.
Whatever the board's wish is, I mean, that's up to you. We need to approve these projects on April 7th if we want the projects complete the summer of 18.
So that's just to stay with our own timeline that we set. And I think.
And April 21st, would you set that back? If it had to move 2 weeks, would they
Yes.
set it back?
Absolutely.
Why is the timeline so tight? I'm just curious. So we've all
It's
been
the
involved
timeline
in-
we've been working
Okay.
toward for the last year or year and a half. It's the timeline that was established to execute contracts in order to provide the contractors the time they need to get their materials, to get on board and get started with site work even before kids get out of school. So they have to take advantage of this spring in order to get foundations in the ground and meet all the individual milestone timelines that are required to get the respective phases of these projects finished. It's just the amount of time they need to get the work done.
So you said summer of 2018, so you mean the end of summer 2018?
Yes, sir.
Schools will be open. Start. Mr. Reiner, with the bond issues that we just issued for these projects, when is our deadline to use the funding before we violate the rules for that?
The temporary period is 3 years long. We should have, and when we did the bond issue, we had to have expectations that the bond proceeds, at least 85% of them would be used in 3 years.
3 years from, it was the end of.
The date of the issue,
when
which
was it?
I
Was that
think
the beginning of this
closing
year?
was February 12th or something like that.
So from the bond, from the point of view of the bond issues, we're looking at February 2019, that we'd have to have that completed by.
Yeah.
Remind me of the repercussions if we don't do that? If we don't spend 85% of what we raised?
Well, we'd be subject to arbitrage at that point. But there's an overall view that we would not issue the bonds unless we had a plan that reasonably expected that the funding would be used by then. So it would be all, if we've done this in good faith. In my mind, we've done this in good faith. I'd be concerned if we start backing off on a project, that could be a problem.
Could we use it for other projects?
Yes, it was a broader description within the bonds. It mentions these projects, but it does say other facilities also.
Thank you.
I mean, my personal perspective on this discussion is that we know that we've got opportunities for efficiency across the district. We know that we haven't redistricted in a long time, and to get to those efficiencies, it's going to be required. We spent a lot of money going down that road. To me, it would be a travesty if the board didn't get to a place that enabled us to fulfill the plan that we've started on. Our intent is to do that. I think what we've all recognized in the last 6 months that we've started to focus on this in a meaningful way is that we've got to balance the different things that the administration works on. Budget's very important now. The academic issues that we've got to tackle are very important. By starting this conversation again on the 17th is our way of trying to balance the different things that we have to do, rather than we're doing one, we're going to stop for a little while, do another. We want to be able to plan these. So this is our attempt to get started and be able to do stage things that we do. So, any other questions on comments on the stuff?
I just want to follow up on what you just said. So I agree with what you just said. Frankly, we shouldn't have had any lapse between the time that we stalled from the capital planning as when we're speaking about redistricting, when we're talking about whether we're going from 10 elementary schools to 8 elementary schools, 3 middle schools to 2 middle schools, whatever the case may be. My concern is, and I'm repeating myself, and to piggyback on what Denise said, we have Howland Elementary School that was probably an unneeded renovation at $18 million, at least as far as capacity. And you could say the same about Goodnow. And it's not about redistricting. This should have been done, and we should have been having this conversation all along. It's about the building of these new schools. So I don't think that I feel the pressure about going against this timeline, especially when we're looking about at February 2019, because there's not a lot of wiggle room. But if we can use it for other projects, that gives us some space there. I hope, and I'm glad to hear this conversation again, I hope that we can get to a place where we see that these buildings were absolutely necessary to spend this $110 million, $170 million of future dollars of this district liability, with Bill talking about future liabilities on this balance sheet here. And I certainly hope that it comes out as a responsible decision that this board made sometime in the future. So I'm happy that I'm again happy that we're having this conversation. The delays, I think, have more of an impact to the redistricting than it does to the efficiency of the building.
Okay, so more to come on the 17th. let's move to the academic standards committee update.
So just a reminder, we obviously have not met tonight. We're meeting on Monday in conjunction with the superintendent's parent advisory committee, where we will break off into secondary and elementary panels with access to a good number of staff members, and it is an open agenda, and everybody asks. And just for the benefit of people who don't know what the superintendent parent advisory committee is, every year 3 representatives from each of our schools meets 5 times a year with Dr. Frazier. So we just take advantage of this opportunity to bring it together with academic standards because it coalesces so beautifully. So this is the one superintendent's meeting that's actually open to everybody. So I hope people will come and share their questions. I also want to say that the academic standards meeting on April the first Thursday, 7th. Right, we should know that. We're going to have some special ed discussions, but we're also going to add, because it's timely, a conversation about the LINKS program, which has had some changes recently because of state laws and things. So that's an update to the agenda. So Monday, March 14th is the secondary and elementary panels, and Thursday, April 7th will be special education and the LINKS program.
Mr. Grubb.
Whatever committee I do, facilities. No, we did facilities just before this meeting. We had the architects in for both of the projects that we're talking about, and they were able to provide us with a virtual walkthrough and a narration of the facilities, so we had an idea what that looks like. They will be providing that video. It is available now as the board meeting, as the committee meeting, but they are going to provide that to Mr. Frederickson, and we'll make an attempt to get that up into a better format in YouTube. We did speak as well. We appreciate the presence of Bob Pellegrino and Nancy Alpaca from Northampton. We were discussing at that point a piece of property which Northampton had acquired from the federal government, which is adjoining Welch Elementary School, and they are interested in putting a parking lot there for about 10 cars to allow people to approach and enter the park from that angle. It is interesting in part because it would also allow entrance to the park without using the school grounds to do that, because during the day, the Welch Elementary parking lot is restricted to the use of the school. So this would allow 10 cars to park there, to walk past and get onto that property as well. They'll come back and show us a little more refinement, and Mr. Cox will be receiving a kind of a pro forma agreement with them for an easement. We also talked briefly about some off-site improvements that are underway or under discussion with regard to Holland Middle School. You may have heard this board speak before about an off-site improvement which would provide a crossing of Buck Road at East Holland Road. To be candid, this has been a requirement presented to us by the Northampton Township. It'll be costing the taxpayers of Council Rock about $80,000 to prepare that and to provide that. So to be perfectly clear, there are a number of board members who, and I am among them, who don't see the purpose of this walkway and don't endorse having a crosswalk across Buck Road there. Speaking only for myself, I see that as being an attractive nuisance for children, to encourage them to cross Buck Road without supervision. As a school district, I believe I speak for the board when I say that the majority of this board has no intention of allowing children to requiring children to cross Buck Road on a crosswalk like that, and we'll continue to provide transportation. So that's one $80,000 item. And there's a second item which relates to the intersection of East Holland Road and Holland Road, which potentially will cost the district an equal amount or more to improve that intersection. So all told, this board is being requested by Northampton, or required by Northampton, to provide $160,000 plus of off-site improvements to build a school for the students of Council Rock, the majority of whom come from Northampton Township. So you will hear in my voice a little commentary there. But I will say this: we do enjoy a good relationship with Northampton Township. As with many good people, we will disagree on some things and we will come to a conclusion. But respectfully, it's done in a spirit of cooperation and mutual respect. Anything else that we discussed? Anybody remember? We talked about the summer projects. They are underway and they'll come before the board later in April because of the requirement on April 7th to go through the bids. I believe we're going to do it at the meeting after the April 7th meeting, which would seem to be April 21st or so, although Easter is in there, so I'm not sure what the date is. And that's the quick summary of the facilities meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Grubbs. Thomas, Finance?
Yes, we had 3 topics on our finance. We had champions, which we voted on tonight. We had audited financial statements, which we voted on tonight, and capital assets appraisal, which we're moving forward. I do want to bring to everybody's attention, because I know we just spent half an hour, whatever we spent, talking about capital planning, and there was some sense of budget. So I'm sensitive that I hope that the administration's time is not having to be preparation for us to have a conversation about what we may have tolerance for in each other, because we've started to do a first glance at the budget, and there's a great deal of work to be done. I would encourage every board member who possibly can, and certainly every member of the public who possibly can, to attend on March 10th, as the first pass of the budget will be presented, and we will have a challenge next year. So please, if you can't come, please make sure that you watch the video. We'll make sure the information gets out to you, but I believe our attention is probably going to be quickly turned to looking at how we're going to address our budget issues, starting with March 10th.
Thank you, Ms. Thomas. Mr. Tate?
Very quickly, our contract is in place with the Pennsylvania School Boards Association to do a systematic review of our school board policies, all 300 or so. They have a new web-based system which will really facilitate all the board members' participation in the process, seeing the drafts that we're creating. We're going to do it in numerical order, but we're going to give special attention to those policies that require attention now. There's particularly 2 of them that are affected by changes in state law, suicide policy, and the second being child abuse. We're going to address those immediately. I'm very impressed with PSBA's willingness to help and their responsiveness. So I think it will be a real productive process.
Thank you, Mr. Tate. Dr. Foster and Ms. Thomas, anything from NBIT?
Next meeting is 2 weeks from now.
Excellent. Cassie, anything from the IU?
No.
And Mr. Violet, you probably want to put the March 11th for that?
Yeah, Monte Carlo night, March 11th. Tickets are $60 a person. There's still some opportunities for donations and sponsorships and whatnot, but it really seems like it's going to be a great event at the Fuge. I urge everyone to come out and have a great time.
That'll move us to our second round of public comment. No? Any final board comment?
I just want to say that I had heard from Renee Devlin because a whole bunch of our middle school and high school students participated in the Pennsylvania Junior Academy of Sciences Council competition. 78 of our students participated, which was up from last year's all-time high of 55. So that's really impressive. All 5 secondary schools participated, so it was for grades 7 and up. And of our 78 participants, 62 of them received a first prize award, which allows them to continue on to the state level competition at Penn State in May. And I'm just like blown away because she sent me a list of what the middle schoolers and the high school taught, some of the topics were. I see them all. So like in the middle school, they did things like how sleep affects the brain and how combining aspirin and fertilizer to boost plant growth. In the high school, there was a project on factors affecting magnetic field strength. space signals, detecting radio frequencies from planets, a novel approach to water purification in developing countries. Wow, it's just so impressive. But the thing that's particularly impressive is that this participation in this, the staff members that support it, that's all on their time. This is above and beyond. This isn't part of the classroom. It's not part of the curriculum. It's an initiative of students who are interested in science and beginning their, inquisitive minds and research thinking, and unbelievable staff members that help foster this and bring this, to a conclusion. And to have that many students participating is astounding. To have that many students achieving so highly is really a remarkable thing, and a huge commentary for students, families, and staff.
So Mrs. Thomas said that there was going to be a budget presentation on the 10th, and that there would be a lot to talk about. There's a lot of difficult work to do. And so that we should be mindful of how much effort we put on capital planning.
Not us, the administration side is what I was
That's right.
saying.
And so I'm interested in conversation among us, as I said previously. But the fascination with capital planning for me is because it's always been the route to save ongoing expenses with the least impact on programs. Because when you run into budget trouble, the switches you can flip the fastest are, oh, I'll just close that language program. I'll close that sports program. I'll do this. You can shut those down with no investment of time. But doing the capital to, consolidate your schools, use your space more efficiently, which leaves all of those programs intact. They're still running. They're just running more efficiently. Unfortunately, that has this huge lead time. And so our ability to access the 1 million for that middle school, or the 600,000 for that elementary school, unfortunately has these statutory lead times of, like a year. It takes a lot of our time with the community, but they don't impact programs the way that quick ones do. And so it'll be really interesting. Can we use the voluminous amounts of red ink we're about to see in March 10th meeting? Can we use that as a motivation to get going so that we can make changes to this district that are less impactful on programs? That's my passion in all of this. That's why I bring it up.
Any other comments? I just had one to make a shout out to the folks at Holland Elementary School. I know I wasn't the only one. I believe there was some other board members who were over there. I call it Dr. Seuss Day. It's National Reading Day. I had the privilege to spend about a half hour, 40 minutes with Miss Post's first grade class reading Dr. Seuss books that continuously got harder and harder to read. It was really cool. As elected officials, we spend a lot of time trying not to get photographed. And over there, Mr. Stanko and Mr. Murphy make sure that we get photographed in compromising positions, which is where they let us out of the building. But again, especially Tara Gilman over there, who really gets the kids going, does a great job with that program. I sadly had to miss it last year. I came back this year, made my second appearance, and aside from some of the great things that we get to do, like graduation, it's really a joy. So I thank folks at Holland Elementary School for including us in that. There's other great stuff that's happening all over the district. But that was one neat one last Friday. So thanks to Holland Elementary. And Mr. Fox, you had one?
Yes, just to announce the executive session before the meeting on a student matter and the executive session that will follow on a student matter.
There was also a brief executive session following the Finance Committee, also on the student discipline matter.
On student discipline, there will be an executive session following tonight's meeting, again on a student matter, a personnel matter, and also on a matter in litigation.
Oh, good shot. Or maybe a good shot.
Yeah, there's 3 volumes.
We got there.